I met a begging child on a footbridge. His left eye was blind, and his right hand was missing 2 fingers. I wanted to give him money, but I had no cash. When I was hesitating, the boy suddenly clung to my leg and said, "Uncle, I'm Michael, save me." Michael is the child of my brother's family, lost 7 years ago, never found. I crouched down, and just as I was about to touch the boy's face, 3 men approached me. They pushed me away and threatened me. "Mind your own business. Get lost." The little boy struggled desperately. He said, "Uncle Junior, help me. I am really Michael." Michael was lost. When he was 6 years old, the little boy in front of me looked only 8 or 9 years old. Whether he is Michael or not, I have to save him. Somebody. Arrest the traffickers. I yelled at the top of my lungs, and everyone around me stopped and stared at the men. The little boy cried out, "Save me. They are human traffickers," poking my eyes blind and breaking my fingers, forcing me to come out and beg. Nonsense. Go home. The man in black, who was in charge, pulled the little boy's arm and was about to leave. I blocked his way. "I'm not allowed to go." The man in black stared at me with eyes as big as oxen. Fortunately, the police came quickly and took the men to the police station. I also followed to the police station. The little boy clutched my hand. I saw the birthmark on his left hand. He is Michael. That little 5-year-old Michael, who loved to draw, was tortured like this. Damn traffickers. I called my brother, who said he would be right there. I work outside the province and my brother is in my hometown. Even if he came by plane, it would take at least 5 hours to get there. After I made a statement at the police station, I took Michael to the hospital for a full-body checkup. Michael had a lot of injuries on his body, except for the eye injury and the finger injury, which was incurable. The other places were not bad. They were superficial injuries. After leaving the hospital, I took Michael back to the rented room. I rented a 1-bedroom house, small, but fairly clean. I pulled Michael into the bathroom and told him how to take a shower. He is 13 years old, but he is not developing well. He looks only 8 or 9 years old. Michael said, "Uncle Junior, did Mom and Dad have another baby?" Michael's words made me freeze for a few seconds. My brother and sister-in-law had one more little boy, this year 6 years old. The child, called John, is a bear child. I do not like him too much. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Michael smiled bitterly and said, "It must have been born. It doesn't matter. I'm his brother." Michael said this. I saw the tears in the corner of his eyes. I said, "Michael, your parents have been looking for you for the past 7 years and never gave up. After you shower and eat, they will come to take you home." Michael nodded and he went to wash up. I turned and went into the kitchen and started cooking. By the time I was done cooking, Michael had finished his shower, and a cleaned-up Michael looked good, like a porcelain doll. He ran into the kitchen to help me with the food. He said, "Uncle, if I hadn't met you today, I'd be dead. They'd sell me again." I don't know how Michael got through these 7 years. I guess he must have suffered a lot. His eyes didn't have the innocence of a child. They were very deep. I touched Michael's head with my hand. I said, "Michael, you have suffered. Your mom and dad will surely make it up to you. Eat quickly." I gave Michael some dishes and put them in his bowl. As he ate, he suddenly burst into tears. He said, "Uncle, my mom and dad won't mind me in my present state, will they? I don't know how to do anything, and I've even become disabled." I put down my chopsticks. My heart was sour. The hateful human traffickers ruined Michael's life. I grabbed Michael's hand tightly and said, "No, your parents especially miss you. They won't dislike you." As soon as my words left my mouth, my cell phone rang. The caller was my brother. I answered the phone and put it on speakerphone. "Brother, where are you?" "I brought Michael to the airport to pick you up." There was silence on the other side of the phone for a few seconds. I passed the phone to Michael's mouth again. "Come on, talk to your dad." Michael looked at me with his eyes His hands were shaking, and it took him half a day to say a word. "Dad, it's Michael." I smiled. "Brother, do you hear me?" "It's Michael." I heard crying coming from the phone. My brother said, "Michael, Dad and Mom are going to see later. There are no more tickets today." Michael's face was instantly written with loss. I was just about to speak when I heard on the other end of the phone came John's voice. "I don't want my brother. Don't let him go home. Mom and Dad are mine alone." I hurriedly minimized the sound of the phone. Michael lowered his head. He said, "Uncle, I go to bed first." Looking at Michael's forlorn back, I felt very uncomfortable. I went to the balcony to make a phone call. "Brother, what are you doing? Michael especially wants to see you, and my sister-in-law. How can he not have a ticket? You can't spoil John like this. What have you done?" "My mom and dad died early. I was raised by my brother, who's 19 years older than me. My brother is 19 years older than me, and John is his oldest child, and my sister-in-law gave birth to him as an older woman, so he is particularly spoiled." "Lawless," my brother said. "John temper." He cried without end. "Am afraid," he cried, bad voice. "Am sure to see Michael tomorrow. You first help me take care of Michael." I said, "Brother, then you should at least video with Michael." My brother hesitated for a while and said, "Okay, video." I hung up the phone and walked to my room. I saw Michael sitting on the bed staring. I said, "Michael, Mom and Dad want to video you." I reached over and touched Michael's little face, and then called my brother to video. My brother answered the video, and surprisingly the background was the downstairs neighborhood greenbelt. This must be because he was afraid that John would be angry, so he ran downstairs to video. My brother was very excited to see Michael. He kept dropping tears, and what he said was not audible at all. Michael red eyes. Half a day before he spoke, "Dad, go back upstairs. It's cold outside." My heart felt like it had been stabbed by a knife, and tears were welling up in my eyes. Michael hung up the video after saying this. He said, "Little uncle, if I hadn't gotten lost, my parents would have loved me as much as my brother." I held Michael in my arms, not knowing how to comfort him. Michael hugged me tightly. He was crying very hard. He said, "Will Mom and Dad still love me? Will my brother accept me?" From the way my brother treated Michael and John, I knew my brother favored John. That bear of a child, John, will definitely not accept Michael. I don't know how to comfort Michael. I can only hold him in my arms. I said, "Don't be afraid. If your mom and dad don't pick you up and take you home, little uncle won't let you go wandering. Little uncle can take care of you. Little uncle will raise you." Michael raised his head and looked at me, like he was afraid of being thrown away. I coaxed Michael, "Go to sleep. When you wake up, Mom and Dad will come to take you home." Michael nodded. The two of us slept in the same bed. Michael was very insecure. He hugged me tightly. After a long time before he fell asleep, I messaged my brother again and asked him to come pick Michael up tomorrow. My brother said that he and his sister-in-law would definitely come to pick Michael up tomorrow. I was then relieved to go to sleep. On the second day, Michael woke up early, and by the time I woke up from my nap, he had already made dinner, like a little adult, and cleaned up my dirty living room. When Michael saw me waking up, he said, "Uncle, let's eat." I smiled and said, "Let's see what's cooking." I walked over to the table and looked. Michael had made cabbage stir-fry with gazpacho. I nodded. Very appetizing. After dinner, I took Michael to the airport. I could see that Michael was very happy. Michael said, "Uncle Junior, what time do my parents arrive?" I looked at the time. "Almost. There are 10 minutes." Michael nodded, and stood in the crowd looking around. After another 10 minutes, there were a lot of people coming out of the exit, but there was no sign of my brother and sister-in-law. Michael looked at me in confusion. I laughed dryly and said, "Maybe the plane is late, or they are in the bathroom. I'll make a call and ask." I stepped aside and called my brother. "Hey, what time are you guys arriving?" My brother said, John is sick, high fever 38 degrees, we are now in the hospital. Michael, you first help us take care of it. I sucked in a breath of cold air. Early not sick, late not sick, but this time to get sick. I said, brother, John is just a common cold. You and sister-in-law can leave one person to take care of it. You come to see Michael. He misses you guys very much, and wants to come home. Do you understand? I knew my brother was biased, but I didn't expect him to be so biased. Michael lacks love in his heart. He wants his mom and dad to love him, and there is no substitute for this kind of love. I can't replace my brother and sister-in-law. My brother said, I understand, but we can't condemn John just because Michael came back. I was furious. I said, Michael has been begging for 7 years. His eyes are blind and his hands are crippled. Don't you feel guilty? Is it that hard to see you? My brother didn't say anything, so I said, brother, what do you really think? I don't believe my brother is a cold-blooded person. He can raise me. How can he not love his own son? My brother said, Jack, you also know, now the cost of raising a child is how big. To raise John one is very difficult. I have just been laid off by the company. Your sister-in-law's salary is not high. Michael, this time to come back, we are really not prepared. We want to make up for Michael, but afraid of John aggrieved. I arched my eyebrows. Brother, what are you talking about? That's Michael's home. What do you need to be ready to go home? My brother didn't say anything. I said, how long do you need to prepare? At least say when, so I can explain to Michael. My brother said, when John gets better. I was so pissed off that I hung up the phone. I went back to Michael, but he wasn't there. Michael, I yelled a few times. No one responded. Did he go to the restroom? I ran to the men's restroom again, but there was no Michael. I panicked. Where did Michael go? He hadn't gotten lost again, had he? I was about to call the police when I heard a noise in the crowd. There's been an accident. A child has been hit by a car. It was right in front of the door. I rushed out, and when I got to the station, I saw Michael in a pool of blood. His eyes were open. My legs went weak. I don't know how I managed to crawl to Michael's side. I couldn't stop the tears from falling down my face. Michael whispered in my ear, Uncle, I want to be John. Michael. Michael. I called out. Michael did not respond. Michael was dead. No temperature. I saw on the monitor that Michael was standing not far behind me while I was talking to my brother on the phone, but at the time, I didn't realize he was there. He ran out crying. He saw the car coming and hit himself. I called my brother. I was crying. Michael's dead. He's dead. Come over and see him. My brother was calm on the phone, like he was relieved. He said, how did he die? I cried like a madman. I said, hit by a car. We called. He heard. You come. My brother hesitated for half a day before saying, I'd better not go. I'm afraid of my own heart. Michael's aftermath, you do it. My brother hung up the phone after saying this, as if Michael was not his child, and should not be in his world. I called my brother again and his phone showed up as being in a call, not answering my calls at all. It was hard for me, but very powerless. I could only cremate Michael's body, as my brother said. Michael's ashes were put in an urn, because I had no money to buy a cemetery. I could only bring Michael's ashes back home. I said, Michael, didn't Uncle Junior say, if your parents don't want you, he'll take care of you? Why don't you believe me? I drank a few bottles of wine, lying on the sofa, half asleep, half awake. I think I saw Michael. He smiled at me and said, Uncle, I'm going home. I saw my brother again. My sister-in-law's body was chopped up with a knife, and the person with the knife turned out to be John. I woke up in shock and looked around. There was no one in the house. I collapsed on my bed in exhaustion and couldn't stop the tears from flowing down my face. It was too late to say anything now. Gradually, I closed my eyes and fell asleep again. When I woke up, It was already noon on the second day. I looked at my cell phone, 8 missed calls, and many messages. These calls and messages were all from my sister-in-law. My brother had actually been in a car accident. I booked the nearest plane ticket and flew back home. My brother's head was knocked out with a concussion, and he lay weakly in the hospital bed, his lips white. My sister-in-law had red eyes and looked much older. When John saw me coming, he actually took the initiative to run to my side and said with a smile, "Little uncle, why did you just come?" As soon as John's words left his mouth, he grabbed my hand. I froze for a few seconds. John never called me uncle. He always called me by my name. See me shouting, "Why today so good behavior?" I didn't like John much, but he was my own nephew. I still touched his head and smiled at him. I walked to the hospital bed. "Brother, sister-in-law," my brother said weakly, "why are you back? Hurry back to work, don't delay." My sister-in-law's eyes were red and haggard. She said, "I asked Jack to come back. I can't take care of it alone." My brother said, "That cannot let Jack back. He still have to work." I said, "It's okay, brother. I'm not busy lately." I asked the leader for a leave of absence. My sister-in-law said, "Jack, I will go home to cook. Your brother and John, you help me take care of it." I nodded. "Don't worry, sister-in-law." I was going to talk about Michael, but looking at my brother and my sister-in-law, I decided to talk about it later. After my sister-in-law left, there were only 3 of us left in the hospital room. John was very quiet. He just sat on the stool and looked at my brother. My brother said, "I'm a little sleepy. I want to take a nap." "Sleep, brother." I looked at John. My brother nodded and he closed his eyes and went to sleep. After a while my brother fell asleep. I was a little sleepy too, but I didn't go to sleep. John was a very naughty boy, and I was afraid that if I fell asleep, he would run out of the room. John suddenly jumped off the stool and ran out laughing. I hurriedly chased after him. John stood still. John ran very fast. In a blink of an eye the kid was gone. I looked from room to room and there was no sign of John. Where did John go? I searched another floor, but I still couldn't find him. Could he have gone back to the ward? This kid is naughty but smart. He never goes to dangerous places. I went back to the 4th floor, and as soon as I entered the door, I saw John standing beside my brother's bed. He had a weird smile on his face, and a fruit knife in his hand. He was looking at my brother like he was looking at a delicious dish. John raised the fruit knife up and was about to stab down. I took an arrow step forward and grabbed John's wrist. John looked up at me. The corners of his mouth rose slightly. "Uncle Junior." I snatched the knife out of John's hand. "What are you doing?" "You're aiming a knife at your dad." My voice was so loud that it woke up my brother. My brother just opened his eyes. John came to my brother's side. "An evil," he said. "Dad, Uncle scolded me, and mean me." My brother touched John's head, and then looked at me. "Jack, what happened?" I so tightened my eyebrows. "He just held a knife at you," John said. "I did not. I cannot help but think of the dream I had. In the dream John killed my brother, and killed my sister-in-law." I said, "John, why did you point the knife at your father?" John shrank in my brother's arms, very aggrieved, said, I didn't take the knife. Little uncle lied." John began to cry. He added, "Little uncle likes Michael, hates me. I don't know what to say." My brother coaxed John. "John, don't cry. Uncle like you." Uncle favorite John. My brother didn't care about John's knife. He was still coaxing the child. I was angry half dead, but John is after all my brother's son. I can't beat John in front of my brother. I pulled John's hand, trying to reason with him. I said, "John, the knife is very dangerous. You can't take the knife." John pulled his hand back. He shrank in my brother's arms, where my brother couldn't see him. He smiled at me, a mocking smile. John hugged my brother tightly. My brother coughed twice dryly. My brother said, "John, hug Dad gently." Dad is going to be strangled by you." John had a smile on his face, and had no intention of letting go. My brother's body is now very weak. John is like a poisonous snake wrapped around him, so that he cannot breathe. I fiercely grabbed John's hand. "Break his hand away. Let go." John was just a kid in the end. He fought back with all his strength, but still I broke his hand. John looked up at me and said, "Uncle, I was just messing around with my dad. Why are you mad at me? Do you hate me that much?" There are words in my heart that I don't dare to say. I felt that the person in front of me was not John, but Michael. But I sent Michael to the crematorium with my own hands, and I even brought his ashes home. There was no way he could turn out to be John. Just when I was confused, my sister-in-law walked in. She said, "Are you hungry?" John jumped down from the bed and ran to my sister-in-law and said, "Mom, I'm hungry." He said, "Mom, I'm hungry." My sister-in-law said, "Mom, I'll feed you." John sat obediently on the chair, and my sister-in-law fed him with chopsticks. I gave my brother and myself some food, and I couldn't help but watch John while he was eating. But I couldn't see anything strange. "I can't see anything strange," my brother said. "Jack, I want to go to the bathroom." I put the chopsticks down. "Okay, I'll go with you." My brother had a concussion, and he was still a little unsteady when he got out of bed, so I helped him to go to the restroom. On the way to the restroom, my brother said, "Jack, thank you for what happened to Michael." When my brother suddenly mentioned Michael, my heart ached. I said, "Why don't you let Michael go home?" My brother did not say anything. My hidden emotions could not be controlled, and my voice became agitated. Just because of John. My brother still didn't say anything. I said, "John is only 6 years old. He's a bear, yes, but he's just a kid. It's still you and my sister-in-law who make the decisions." My brother's eyes went red, and he said, "Stop it." My brother added, "Michael is dead. What's the point of talking about it? I'm not asking him not to come home. I'm asking him to come home later. Your sister-in-law and I are not ready for him to come home." My brother and I got into an argument in the hallway. "What do you mean, ready?" My brother's hands clenched into fists, and he pushed me away and walked on his own. I was angry, but I followed. I waited for my brother in front of the restroom. My brother came out of the restroom. He washed his face with water and then said to me, "Jack, don't ever mention Michael again. I'm begging you." I looked at the ground and didn't say anything. On the way back, my brother may feel that the atmosphere is too heavy. He spoke first and said, "Have you noticed that John has become a good boy? Behaved." I know very little about John, and usually do not pay much attention to it. John 2 or 3 years old. I went to work outside the province. My brother said, "Usually your sister-in-law feeds him. He never eats cabbage, but today he ate it." My brother also said, "John has grown up. He's not picky about what he eats. Cabbage." I remember Michael likes to eat green vegetables, especially cabbage. No good. My sister-in-law is in danger. I couldn't explain to my brother, and ran towards the ward, but I was still a step too late. A nurse ran out of the ward, shouting, "Doctor, someone's been electrocuted." When I ran to the ward, I saw my sister-in-law on the ground, unconscious. John was standing not far away, looking on indifferently. The corners of his mouth rose slightly as he looked at me, and said, "Uncle, my mom was electrocuted." Doctors and nurses ran in and put my sister-in-law on a stretcher, and pushed her out to be rescued. My brother anxiously said, "Jack, you watch John." My brother followed me up, and only John and I were left in the hospital room. John was sitting on the hospital bed, looking around, not caring about my sister-in-law's life or death. I said, "How did your mom get electrocuted?" John looked up at me. He smiled and said, "Uncle, I'm only 6 years old. How would I know?" I walked over to John and gazed into John's eyes. "Tell the truth, did you do it?" John shrugged his shoulders, deliberately avoiding my line of sight. He jumped off the bed and ran towards the door. Little uncle is not good. I go to find my parents, I yelled towards John's back. Michael. John stopped in his tracks. His body stiffened in place. My heart hanged violently. Michael turned around stiffly. He said, "Little uncle, I am John, not Michael." John ran out after saying this. I was left alone in the hospital room. My thoughts were a little confused. I still chased after him. Outside the operating room, Michael was sitting on my brother's lap, playing with my brother's fingers. My sister-in-law was lucky. She was electrocuted but saved her life because of the low voltage. She was transferred to the general ward. My sister-in-law said, "I was the one who accidentally fell. I didn't realize that the heated pot was leaking electricity, and there was water on the floor. Luckily John was fine." My brother said, "Be careful in the future. Thanks to nothing serious happened. There is no surveillance in the hospital room. If there is, I will definitely call up the surveillance." My intuition tells me that my sister-in-law's electrocution has something to do with John. In the next few days, I stayed in the hospital and observed John. My brother, my sister-in-law was also safe these days. After a few more days, when it was time to leave the hospital, I followed my brother and sister-in-law home. When I got home, my brother and sister-in-law were cooking in the kitchen. I wanted to go over to help, but my brother said, "Jack, you play with John. You don't need to cook. I will cook with your sister-in-law." John took my hand and walked towards his room. "Little uncle, you play with me." I nodded and went into his room with John. John's room was decorated with a lot of toys and all kinds of snacks. Although John's mouth didn't say anything, I saw excitement in his eyes. It was as if everything in this house was new. He picked up a small car and looked at it. I was standing next to him. I thought he was going to play with the car with me, but in the end, he dropped the car hard on the ground and it was shattered. John looked at me and said, "Uncle Junior, why did you drop my little car?" I frowned. "What did you say?" I didn't understand why John did that. John suddenly shouted, "Uncle Junior, don't hit me." John slammed into the wall. His forehead was bruised. Before I could react, my brother and sister-in-law pushed the door in. My sister-in-law said, "What's going on?" My sister-in-law picked John up. She glared at me and asked John, "What's going on?" "Tell Mom." John cried and said, "Uncle Junior pushed me." I said, "I didn't. He hit himself." Obviously, my sister-in-law did not believe my words. My sister-in-law felt sorry for John and softened his forehead with her hand. "John, don't cry. Don't cry." My brother said, "John, you're lying. How could your brother-in-law push you?" My sister-in-law glared at my brother again. She held John, walked out of the place where I could not see, said, "How is it impossible?" She added, "Have you forgotten? Your brother talked to himself like he was crazy when he was a kid. I told you he wasn't quite sane." My brother's face changed. He closed the door. "Chenhua, you do not go too far. What are you talking about?" My sister-in-law said, "What did I say? My son's head has been knocked to such a state. You don't know how to feel sorry for him." My brother and sister-in-law were arguing outside the door. "When I was a child, I once had a fever that wouldn't go away. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I could see people who had passed away, and when they talked to me, I responded to them. They weren't bad, and they didn't hurt me. When I got better, I couldn't see them. I still don't know if what happened back then was true or not. Was I hallucinating?" I heard John say, "Let Uncle Junior go. Let him go. I'm scared." My sister-in-law said, "John, don't cry. Don't cry. If you cry again your voice should break." My brother opened the door. He looked at me with a sad face. I knew he came to drive me away. I said, "Brother, I really did not push John." My brother said, "I know. I believe you. John, he is just too naughty. He is still a child. You do not with him general understanding." I said, "Brother, you and sister-in-law be careful. I really saw John with a knife to kill you." That is not simply naughty, that is murder. John suddenly became like this. I suspect something is wrong with him. I have a thought in my mind, but I don't dare to say it. I felt that what was in front of me was not John, but Michael. My brother took out $1,000 from his pocket. He said, "John, the first didn't educate him well, I know. Don't worry." My brother stuffed money into my hand. "Go back to work." I put the money on the bed and I said, "Brother, can I leave tomorrow? It's too late today." My brother hesitated for a few seconds. He said, "Okay, then stay at home for one more night. You will stay in John's room." I nodded and my brother opened the door and walked out. I heard my brother talking to my sister-in-law in a low voice, and my sister-in-law purposely said out loud, "If he dares to hit my son again, I will beat him to death." My sister-in-law is a person who is very nice at times and loves to take the bull by the horns at other times, especially when it comes to John. She can't wait to hold it in her hands. After a while, John pushed the door in, and he said, "Little uncle, dinner." I nodded, "Good." I went to the kitchen to help serve the food. John took the drinks, pouring drinks for us. When we were eating, my sister-in-law gave John some food. "Son, eat more." John shook his head and said, "I don't want to eat." My sister-in-law put the food into her own mouth and said with a smile, "It's quite delicious. Why don't you eat it?" My brother said, "I don't like this dish." "Then change it." My brother brought the plate of cola chicken wings to John and gave him a piece of cola chicken wings. My sister-in-law said, "Bones, Bones, bring him out." My brother said, "Look at my memory. Dad will peel the chicken wings for you." I thought to myself, I'm too spoiled for John. This kind of favoritism, even a little bit to Michael. Michael will not kill himself. I don't know why, but my eyes turned red uncontrollably. My brother passed the chicken wing meat to Michael's mouth. John shook his head. He said, "Dad, eat." My brother smiled. "Okay, Dad, eat." John want to eat. "What?" John said. "I don't want anything." These dishes are John's favorites, but he did not eat a bite. Is there something wrong with the food? Suddenly, I saw my brother and sister-in-law fall to the ground and go limp. My head was spinning, and I sat down on the floor. Only John was okay. My brother said weakly, "What happened?" My sister-in-law said, "Son, go and call for help." John smiled and said, "Why call someone?" John went to the kitchen, took a fruit knife and came back. He walked to my brother and said, "You lied to me. You said you don't like Michael, but you went downstairs to video with him, and you even cried." My brother was very weak and spoke in a very small voice. He said, "I did go to video with Michael. I lied to you because I was afraid you would be angry." "Good boy, put the knife down." John put the knife against my brother's neck. He roared, "Why video with Michael? Didn't you say you only like John? There is only one son for John." I said, "John, you put the knife down. He is your father. He is not good enough for you. Michael is your brother. In order to take care of your feelings, your brother to the end of his life did not get to see your father once. What else do you want?" My brother's tears were falling down the corners of his eyes. His lips were trembling. John looked at me and he said, "Michael deserves to die. I don't have a brother." My sister-in-law cried and said, "John, put the knife down. Are you crazy?" John ran to my sister-in-law's side. He shouted angrily, "Your old cell phone is full of Michael's pictures. You think I don't know? I saw it all, and you hid the phone. You always call me by the wrong name. Call me Michael. I hate you. I hate all of you. You can only love me. You can only like me one." A 6-year-old kid. He was so jealous of Michael. Michael is his own brother. Michael never hurt him. Why is he like this? My sister-in-law had red eyes, like human life, and her eyes were full of remorse. She said, "Leo Yong, we have sinned. We deserve it." My brother didn't say anything. He also had a look of remorse. John ran to my side. He said, "Uncle, I did not want to kill you. After all, you died. no one can take care of me, but you have to stay, I can only kill you." John laughed happily, and he ran into the master bedroom again. Not knowing what to rummage through, my brother smiled bitterly and said, "Retribution, retribution." John held out a box from the master bedroom. He threw the box on the floor, stomped hard with his feet a few times. He said, "Here are all Michael's things. After so many years, you still keep it. I want to burn it." John took a lighter and lit the box on fire. My sister-in-law said, Don't burn it." John smiled and said, "Burn it all." I looked at John with confusion. "Why do you call me uncle? Why are you eating cabbage? You don't usually call me uncle, much less eat cabbage." John ran to me and knocked my head hard with his hand. "My mom said you are a crazy person. You met unclean things when you were a child, so you believe in these. Even if I killed them, you would think Michael did it." I said, "From the time I came back, you started planning to kill people." John said, "Yes, kill anyone who doesn't like me." John is smart, but he is only 6 after all. I said, "Brother, sister-in-law, is there any more of Michael's stuff in the house?" My brother looked at me and he said, "Yes." John was instantly enraged. He said, "Where is it? Where did you hide Michael's things?" My brother from sadness awake, he said, "Hidden in the neighborhood door under the tree. Inside are Michael's childhood clothes." John raised his hand, slapped my brother. He said, "You damn, still hiding his things." In front of my brother's neighborhood, there are a few small trees that the security guards keep an eye on to keep kids from touching them. If John goes over to dig something, the security guard will definitely not allow. Then, there will be a chance of being saved. My brother said with red eyes, "I am your father." John snorted coldly. He said, "No, you are Michael's dad." John said, "When I dig up the stuff and burn it, I'll come over and kill you guys." John said this and ran out. Only the 3 of us were left in the house. My brother and sister-in-law were crying like tears, but I didn't sympathize with them. I only pitied Michael. After a while, the security guard came. The guard knocked on the door and said, "Are you home?" I said with all my might, "Help." The guard knocked again and I heard him dialing the police. When the police arrived, we were rescued, but John was nowhere to be found. A few of us searched for him in the neighborhood, my brother shouting, "John," and my sister-in-law shouting, "John," as if she were crazy. I saw John on the top floor of the neighborhood, brother, sister-in-law, John on the rooftop. We rushed to the rooftop. My brother said, "John, you quickly down." John said, "No, I do not go down. You will certainly kill me." My sister-in-law said, "No, Mom and Dad forgive you. It's all because they didn't educate you well." My sister-in-law's voice was shaking. "They have already lost Michael. If they lose John again, they are afraid that they will not be able to survive." My brother said, "Come down quickly. Don't jump. John is very smart. He knows this is a big deal, so he threatens with death. He doesn't want to die, but is using my brother, my sister-in-law's love for him, to ask for forgiveness, to let bygones be bygones." I walked towards John. John said, "Don't come over. If you come over again I will jump." I said, "Then you jump." John stood still and didn't know what to do. I walked over to John, grabbed him by his shirt and pulled him down. My brother, my sister-in-law held him in place. I said, "Brother, sister-in-law, spoiling a son is like killing a son. Think about it." My brother raised his hand and slapped John. Blood flowed from the corner of John's mouth. My sister-in-law stood by and watched. She didn't say anything. John still wanted to splash around. My brother kicked again, kicked on John. John could read faces. He was not flailing, but stood still and cried. But my brother, my sister-in-law didn't coax him. Let him cry by himself. My brother said, "I'm sorry, Michael. Jack, I'll go back with you. I'll bring Michael's ashes home, buy him a grave and visit him." I said, "Brother, Michael's ashes are better for me to keep. I got off the rooftop, went straight to the airport and bought the nearest flight back. When I returned to my rented room, I offered 3 jaw sticks to Michael and went to the sorcerer with his ashes in my arms. The sorcerer, whom I had met when I was a child, said I would come back to him later and left me an address. I didn't expect his words to come true. I found the sorcerer and told him my claim, and he said that within 10 years, bad luck would follow me. I nodded, and sent Michael's ashes to the sorcerer. Then, I went down the mountain. After another 1 year, the boss of my company sent a message in the circle of friends. Her wife gave him a second child, a boy. I clicked on the photo and looked at it. There was a birthmark on the left hand of the little child. The birthmark looked the same as the one on Michael's hand. The corners of my mouth rose slightly, and the matter of my heart was finally over.